Welcome to Scrub Talk Crossroads. Today, we're diving into a topic that's absolutely crucial for anyone in healthcare, especially those of us in the surgical field. Sharon, I'm so eager to pick your brain on this. Let's start with some foundational definitions. Can you clarify the difference between certification, licensure, and registration?
Absolutely, Awady. It's a vital distinction. Certification is essentially a recognition by an appropriate body that an individual has met a predetermined standard. Think of it as a credential that says you've achieved a certain level of proficiency. Licensure, on the other hand, is a legal right. It's granted by a government agency, allowing you to practice a profession in compliance with specific statutes. It's about legal authorization and oversight. Registration is a more formal process where qualified individuals are simply listed in a registry. It's often a baseline requirement, sometimes for tracking purposes, but doesn't always imply the same level of legal authorization as a license.
That makes perfect sense. So, certification is like saying you're good at something, licensure is the government saying you're allowed to do it, and registration is just being on a list. Got it. Now, let's move to some of those Latin phrases we hear. Eger primo and primum non nocere, they sound important. What's the core message of each for a surgical technologist?
They are incredibly important, representing guiding ethical pillars. Eger primo is the guiding principle of the Association of Surgical Technologists, or AST. It translates to the patient first. This means that in every decision, every action, the patient's well-being and safety should be your absolute top priority. Primum non nocere translates to, above all, do no harm. It's a fundamental medical maxim, emphasizing the ethical imperative to avoid causing injury or suffering to patients. These two phrases together form a powerful ethical framework for all healthcare professionals, especially in the high-stakes environment of an operating room.
I love that. The patient first and do no harm. It really simplifies the immense responsibility. Now, for some of the trickier legal doctrines, the doctrine of borrowed servant and the doctrine of foreseeability sometimes get confused. Can you walk us through those?
Certainly. The doctrine of borrowed servant is quite interesting from a liability perspective. It states that the one controlling or directing the employee has greater responsibility than the one paying the employee. You often see this applied to a surgeon, particularly with the captain of the ship doctrine, where the surgeon is held responsible for those under their direct control in the OR. However, a crucial point here for a surgical technologist is that you can still be held responsible if you fail to carry out a routine procedure correctly. So, while you might be borrowed, you're not exempt from your own professional duties. The doctrine of foreseeability is about anticipating harm. It's the ability to reasonably anticipate that harm or injury may result because of certain acts or omissions. A classic example is not applying a safety strap to a patient on the operating table or leaving a side rail down while transporting a patient. If a reasonable person could foresee that those omissions could lead to an injury, then this doctrine applies and liability could follow.
Wow, that really puts the onus on every individual to be vigilant. So even if the surgeon is the captain, I'm still responsible for my own actions, which links to the doctrine of personal liability, right?
Precisely, Awady. You've made an excellent connection. The doctrine of personal liability states that each person is responsible for his or her own conduct, even though others may be held liable as well. A prime example is if a surgeon delegates a task to you that falls outside your scope of practice. While the surgeon is indeed wrong to make such a request, if you perform that task and something goes wrong, you will be held personally liable. It underscores the importance of knowing your boundaries and adhering to your defined scope of practice.
That's a powerful reminder to always know your scope and stand firm if something feels off. Let's shift gears slightly. HIPAA. Everyone talks about it, but what's the core of what a surgical technologist needs to understand about it?
HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, is a federal act. Its core purpose for allied health professionals is establishing privacy standards to protect patients' medical records and other health-related information. For a surgical technologist, this means a strict adherence to confidentiality. You cannot discuss patient information with anyone who is not directly involved in that patient's care.
This includes conversations in the cafeteria, on social media, or even with family members who are not authorized to receive that information. It's about safeguarding patient privacy above all else.
So basically, keep your lips sealed unless it's directly related to care. Chuckles. Good advice for life, really. Now, let's tackle some other fundamental definitions related to legal wrongs. What exactly is a tort, and how does liability tie into it?
A tort is a civil wrong that causes injury to another person. It can be intentional or unintentional. If you think about physical harm or even harm to reputation, those could fall under torts. Pause. Liability is the obligation to either do or not do something. When we talk about torts, liability is the legal responsibility for the harm caused. There are two main types: personal liability, which we just discussed, meaning you are responsible for your own actions, and corporate liability, where the healthcare facility itself can be held responsible for things like faulty equipment or systemic failures in patient care.
Got it. Torts are civil wrongs and liability is the responsibility. How about negligence and malpractice? They sound similar, but I know there's a distinct difference.
There is a critical distinction. Negligence is defined as a lack of skill or care, a departure from the accepted standard of care. It can be an oversight and unintentional error. For example, if you accidentally drop a sterile instrument on the floor, that could be seen as negligence. However, negligence can become criminal if there's a reckless, willful disregard for the safety of another. Inhales. Malpractice, on the other hand, is professional misconduct, a lack of judgment or a lack of skill that specifically results in harm to another. It's typically applied to professionals, doctors, nurses, surgical technologists, where their professional actions or omissions fall below the accepted standard, leading to patient injury. So while all malpractice involves negligence, not all negligence rises to the level of malpractice.
So malpractice is a more specific professional form of negligence that leads to harm. That really clarifies it. And what about abandonment? That sounds incredibly serious.
It absolutely is serious. Abandonment means leaving a patient who needs care and is dependent on the caregiver's presence. In a surgical setting, this could mean unilaterally leaving your post during a procedure, or if you're assigned to a patient and you simply walk away without ensuring proper handoff or coverage, especially if the patient is in a vulnerable state. It's a severe breach of professional duty and can have significant legal and ethical consequences.
That's unthinkable, honestly. Moving to something a bit more proactive, incident/sentinel event reports. What's their purpose and why are they so important?
Incident or sentinel event reports are crucial tools for patient safety and quality improvement. They are formal reports of an irregular or adverse patient occurrence forwarded to the facility's risk management department. The purpose isn't to assign blame, but to investigate what went wrong, identify systemic issues, and implement measures to prevent similar events from happening again. A sentinel event is a type of incident that results in an unanticipated death or serious physical or psychological injury or the risk thereof. Reporting these events is vital for continuous learning and improving patient outcomes.
So it's about learning from mistakes, not just punishing them. I like that perspective. Now, can you quickly touch upon iatrogenic injury and slander?
Certainly. An iatrogenic injury is an adverse outcome that results directly from the activity of healthcare professionals. This isn't necessarily due to negligence, but rather an unintended consequence of a medical intervention. For example, a nerve injury sustained during a technically complex surgery, even when all precautions were taken, could be considered iatrogenic. As for slander, it's an oral statement that damages a person's reputation. It's one of two types of defamation, the other being libel, which is written defamation. So, if you were to spread false, damaging rumors about a colleague or patient verbally, that would be slander.
Harm caused by care and spoken words that hurt reputations. Definitely important to remember. Let's switch from definitions to practical application for a moment. We have a list of safety measures and hazardous conditions. Can you clarify why using a neutral zone when a surgeon uses a microscope is actually a hazardous condition and what the correct approach should be?
That's an excellent point, Wade, and it highlights a common misunderstanding.
While neutral zones are generally excellent for sharp safety, when a surgeon is using a microscope or loupes, their visual field is highly magnified and extremely narrow. Placing a sharp in a neutral zone, even if well-intended, carries a significant risk because the surgeon may not be able to precisely locate it or even see it when looking away from the operative field. The safer, recommended technique in this scenario is a hand-to-hand passing technique, verbally notifying the surgeon when you pass a sharp item, maintaining direct control, and ensuring immediate exchange. This minimizes the risk of the surgeon inadvertently reaching for or losing track of a sharp in a limited visual field.
Ah, so it's about context then. The general rule isn't always the best rule in a specific OR situation. That's a great insight. And why is covering eyes and a nasal cannula with dry towels during oral laser surgery considered hazardous?
That's a major safety concern. Lasers generate intense heat and light, and dry towels can be highly flammable. If a laser accidentally fires outside the treatment area and hits a dry towel, it could ignite, causing a flash fire and severe burns to the patient or staff. The correct protocol for laser surgery, especially around the head and neck, is to use wet towels to outline the surgical site. The moisture helps to absorb and dissipate the laser energy, preventing accidental fires and providing a protective barrier. It's a critical fire prevention measure.
That's a definite aha moment for me. Protection against actual fire. And one more. Why is applying all pressure point pads after moving the patient to the OR table considered hazardous instead of the safety strap first?
It's a matter of immediate safety. When you move a patient from a stretcher to the operating room table, there's a brief period where they are most vulnerable to falling. The absolute first priority after the patient is positioned is to apply the safety strap. This prevents falls from the table. Only after the patient is secured should you then proceed to systematically pad all pressure points to prevent nerve damage or skin breakdown during the longer duration of the surgery. Prioritizing the safety strap ensures the patient is immediately stabilized and protected from an acute fall risk.
Safety strap first, always. That makes so much sense. Okay, let's quickly fill in some blanks with legal principles, just to test our understanding. An act that causes another person to fear they will be touched offensively without consent and/or authority, that's an assault and/or battery, correct?
Precisely. An assault is the threat of bodily harm, making someone fear they will be touched in an offensive or injurious manner. Battery is the actual unlawful touching. They often go hand in hand in medical contexts.
And if a person makes disparaging remarks about a patient, that could be charged as which intentional tort?
That would be defamation, specifically slander if it's spoken as we discussed. It's an intentional tort because the intent is to harm someone's reputation.
Got it. And discussing a case while eating lunch in the cafeteria, that's an intentional tort of...
That's an invasion of privacy. You are discussing protected health information in a public or inappropriate setting, thereby violating the patient's right to privacy and confidentiality, which ties back to our HIPAA discussion.
Definitely. Finally, if a specimen is accidentally lost, thrown away, or improperly prepared, the surgical technologist could be found guilty of?
That would be negligence. It reflects a lack of care or adherence to established protocols regarding specimen handling, which could have serious consequences for patient diagnosis and treatment. It's a departure from the standard of care.
Excellent. Now, let's dig into the 4 major components of negligence. We've talked about it a bit, but what are those 4 essential elements?
To establish negligence, 4 elements must be proven. First, duty. The defendant, in this case the surgical technologist, must have a duty to the patient. For a CST, this means performing your job according to the established standard of care for your role. Second is breach of duty. This means the defendant failed to conform to that required standard of conduct, so the CST didn't follow accepted practices or facility policies. Third, direct cause. The breach or negligent conduct must be the direct cause of the harm to the patient. The CST's deviation from the standard of care must have directly led to the injury. And finally, damage. There must actually be harm or damage to the patient. If there was a deviation from the standard of care but no harm resulted, then there's no cause for a negligence claim.
All four elements must be present for a negligence claim to succeed.
That's a very clear breakdown. It's not enough to just make a mistake, it has to cause actual harm because of a duty breached. Let's move on to consent. We have implied versus expressed and general versus special. Give us the rundown.
Certainly. Implied consent occurs under circumstances that lead the healthcare provider to believe the patient has given permission. For example, if a patient extends their arm for a blood pressure cuff, consent is implied. Express consent is a direct statement, either verbal or ideally written, granting permission for treatment. Written is always preferred for significant procedures. Then we have general consent, which provides permission for routine care and treatment, like basic touching, and is usually signed upon hospital admission. Special informed consent, however, is for specific invasive procedures, like surgery. It requires informing the patient of risks, benefits, and alternative therapies in language they can understand. Critically, the surgeon is responsible for securing this written, informed consent prior to the procedure.
So basically, for surgery, it always needs to be special, informed, and written. Excellent. What about the AST Code of Ethics? What are the key takeaways for surgical technologists?
The AST Code of Ethics outlines the fundamental principles that should guide a surgical technologist's professional conduct. Key takeaways include maintaining high standards for professional conduct in patient care, always upholding confidentiality, respecting and protecting patients' rights, adhering to do no harm, collaborating effectively with other healthcare professionals, strictly following principles of asepsis, committing to continuous education, practicing with pride and dignity, and reporting any unethical conduct you witness. Ultimately, it asks surgical technologists to embody integrity and patient advocacy in every aspect of their role.
That's an incredibly comprehensive code. It's about being a complete professional, essentially. Now, how does a surgical technologist determine their scope of practice? It sounds like it could vary a bit.
You hit on a key point, Ayode. It can vary. Determining your scope of practice involves checking multiple sources. First and foremost, consult hospital policies and your specific job description. These documents outline what you are authorized to do within that particular facility. Then, look at state law, as licensure or regulatory boards can define broader parameters. Finally, refer to accepted national standards set by professional organizations like the AST, AORN, AAMI, and AHA. These provide guidelines for what a reasonably prudent surgical technologist with similar education, training, and experience would do. The key is that your actions must align with your training, demonstrated competence, and the facility's defined procedures for your role.
So it's a layered approach, facility, state, and national guidelines. Very thorough. And finally, the timeout. It sounds simple, but why is it so incredibly important, and what errors does it particularly prevent?
The timeout is anything but simple in its importance. It is a critical safety measure, literally the last verification prior to incision. It protects both the patient and the entire surgical team. Its primary purpose is to be a final, universal verification of essential information. It prevents devastating errors, such as wrong patient surgery, wrong site surgery, which could be the wrong limb or organ, and wrong side surgery, where the procedure is performed on the incorrect side of the body. During the timeout, the team collectively confirms the patient's identity, the correct surgical site and side, the procedure to be performed, and confirms the availability of all necessary equipment and implants. It's a pause that demands active participation from everyone to ensure everything is correct before proceeding.
A pause that saves lives. What a powerful concept. Sharon, this has been such an incredible, informative session. Thank you for clarifying these crucial legal and ethical concepts for our listeners. It truly highlights the immense responsibility and expertise required in surgical technology. We've covered so much ground today.
My pleasure, Wade. It's a field where understanding these principles isn't just good practice, it's absolutely essential for patient safety and professional integrity. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for sharing your insights. To all our listeners, stay safe, stay informed, and always put the patient first. That's all for Scrub Talk Crossroads today. See you next time.